pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for February 6th, 2018. We're going to LAFC, brand new franchise in Major League Soccer, starting up in the next few weeks. And to talk about LAFC, one of our favorites is on the show today, Alicia Rodriguez. Used to be on Goats Parade long time ago, 3.5 years ago, but now it's the Angels on Parade. Alicia, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me on.
No problem, Alicia. And as it's 3.5 years, time flies. Kevin and I had just started podcasting together back then, and here we are 3.5 years later, when you actually have players and stuff to talk about with LAFC, and that must be exciting. One player in particular that just signed yesterday, that's not going to get a lot of press outside of Toronto and around here where he's from, is Mark Anthony Kaye. Played for Louisville for the last couple of years. Started with TFC Academy. Real quickly, what do you think of that young player, and you know, what kind of role do you think, what kind of chance do you think he'll have to get some playing time for LAFC this year?
Yeah, he's an interesting player because, you know, one of the things that I think the USL partnership with MLS was supposed to do was supposed to develop players to eventually play in MLS. And as we've seen with Kaye, you know, he's kind of worked his way through USL the last 4 years, and he's a Canadian international now. And according to the reports, it wasn't confirmed by either team, but the reports had it that this was a record transfer from a USL club to an MLS club. So in that regard, it seems like it's a pretty good signing. You know, he comes with some expectations, I would say. That being said, like you said, I don't think he's going to be, you know, the marquee player by any means, but midfield has been the biggest position of need so far as they're building their inaugural roster. And I think that Mark Anthony will probably have a good chance at getting, you know, a fair amount of playing time. You know, we'll have to see when the actual roster is completely filled out, you know, where it all shakes out. But I wouldn't be surprised if he, you know, gets a decent run this year.
Yeah, real quickly, I've covered Mark Anthony for quite a while, right back to his pre-professional season. I know that the problem with TFC, for the TFC fans listening out there, is it wasn't a great fit. They were kind of looking for a fullback, and he's more of an outside wing player, and it just didn't fit the system and TFC's needs at the time. So that's kind of why they released him, and they did release him outright, which is why TFC did not maintain the rights. A lot of people have been asking me that, but anyway, we'll move on from that, Alicia. So, as I said off the top, you got players and stuff to talk about now. Just in a general way, now that I think there are 18 players you're up to now on the roster, are you surprised by some of the choices that have been made, or what are your overall thoughts, your general thoughts of the roster building so far?
I wouldn't say I'm too surprised. I mean, obviously, when you come in for a brand new team, and we've seen enough expansion teams the last several years to kind of get a feel for how teams, you know, put together their rosters to start with. And I think a lot of people are expecting, you know, big names to be coming to the team. But I think with Bob Bradley coaching and John Thorrington, you know, building the roster, these are guys who have a lot of connections in American soccer, to some extent in Canadian soccer too. So that, plus the fact that obviously all of the MLS teams are restricted to have only so many internationals, you know, I think I was a little bit nervous that some of these nascent LAFC fans were going to be disappointed to find out, you know, that they couldn't sign all of Germany, or, you know, the German national team or something like that. Like, they were going to have to be realistic on some front. And I think for the most part, people have been. You know, obviously they have Carlos Vela, who is touted as somebody who, you know, is going to be the kind of the face of the franchise. And speaking to him a few weeks ago, he's somebody that I think he perceives himself as somebody who's gotten a bad rap to an extent in Mexico, because, you know, the Mexican press is pretty unforgiving. They often rumor monger, and you know, obviously that turns players off to some extent. I think that's partially why he decided to come to the United States and not to go to a Mexican club at this stage in his career. And he says that, he considers himself shy, but he knows that his job is to help sell this team and sell this league, and he's, ready to do that. And I think that's exactly the right attitude that you need to take when you're starting a team. And then besides that, I think that there's obviously going to be a few, that's a surprise, but, a lot of the players have connections to, like I said, Bradley and Thorrington, like Omar Gaber, Egyptian international. He played under Bradley on the Egyptian national team a few years ago, and, so on and so forth. So I think that combination of kind of prospective players who could, really shine in a couple of years, combined with obviously experience that I think every successful expansion team needs, and then a little bit of that glitz and glamour that they, can hopefully mesh in a hurry and actually make sure that the expansion team is not going to be, in a bad position to start with. It seems like that's kind of the blueprint they're following, and that to me makes a lot of sense.
One of the big move of LAFC was one of their first ones as well. During the expansion draft, they got Laramee from Montreal, and that mixed with Walker Zimmerman makes for a pretty interesting middle of the back line. And for an expansion team to start with some veterans in the back line could be a positive going forward. How surprised were you when Laramee, the captain and the general, was traded to LAFC, and how are you seeing this defense for LAFC so far?
Yeah, I was obviously surprised when they traded for him because, he's somebody that I think was really connected to the city of Montreal. Obviously, he speaks French. He had, moved over there to begin with for family reasons. And, watching it, I went to the expansion draft that day and hearing the rumors at the event that they were having for it, and, immediately after the draft had taken place, and then seeing kind of the social media fallout where it seemed like he wasn't really in the loop as far as moving. It made you pretty nervous right off the bat because it was like, well, the worst thing that you want is to have kind of a pillar of your team to be somebody who doesn't even want to be there. But it sounds like he kind of came around pretty quickly. LAFC, I guess belatedly gave him the pitch of why they wanted him. And I think the pairing of him and Zimmerman, obviously we'll have to see on the field how it shakes out, but on paper, it makes a lot of sense. It seems like one of those kind of moves that makes sense for everyone. You have somebody who's experienced in Simon. Obviously, he's been a defender of the year in MLS. He's been a little bit kind of off the pace, since then, but I think he's still somebody who's really savvy, and, if he's around the right group, I think he definitely has a lot to offer still. And then paired with Zimmerman, a younger player who had a bad season and just seemed to have a falling out with his coach. That's kind of the stroke of luck that, an expansion team you want. You want somebody who's on the rise, who has still more growth in his game, a lot of years ahead of him, paired with somebody experienced like Simon. And, again, it seems like something that really makes a lot of sense, and we'll have to see how it works. But this seems like the kind of center back pairing that should be formidable in Major League Soccer. And if that's the case, then that should put the team on good footing. Again, I think the big thing is obviously LAFC wants to be competitive. But, expansion teams have such a hard time in making sure that they are competitive. And, we saw obviously the example of Atlanta last year. We saw the example of Minnesota, and that's kind of to some extent, it's not the best and worst case, but it's, pretty close to the best case scenario for Atlanta, and in the end, mediocre finish for Minnesota. And I think LAFC definitely obviously wants to be closer to, the best case scenario than they do kind of somewhere in the middle.
I want to talk for a second, Alicia, about the branding of this team. We've talked about this before last year when you were on the show, talking about the Angels, LAFC, the logo, the branding, the colors. But now, with players and coaches and an actual training camp started, what I see is attitude. And I say attitude in the positive sense of it. I've heard rumors of soccer events in Los Angeles area where people from the Galaxy on one side of the room, people of LAFC on the other side of the room, eyeing each other, trying to get something on each other. And I really like that atmosphere of, you know what, we're coming here, we got money, we're taking over, we're not coming here to take part, we're coming here to take over. And the LAFC is having that attitude that I can only describe as the Raiders of the 1990s. And it feels to me a bit of the same way. Do you think that the branding, attitude, the atmosphere, the ambiance that this team has created already has taken over?
I mean, I think they're working hard on that, and I think, you know, it obviously depends on who you talk to. You know, if you talk to somebody who's in the LAFC camp, I think that they're doing their strategy in marketing the team and developing, like you said, an attitude, and I think that's absolutely spot on. You know, they're doing a good job at it, and I think they're definitely distinguishing themselves from the Galaxy. I think if you talk to the Galaxy, they think of it as, you know, sort of a cute diversion, and, you know, they're not even on the field yet, so, you know, let's wait and see what they look like when they start playing. You know, the Galaxy have 5 MLS Cups and so on and so forth. It's been interesting because, you know, obviously this isn't the first time that there's been 2 teams in LA. But the first time the branding was so different for the other team. And the Galaxy, I think, you know, I don't want to really slam the marketing department, but for so long they didn't really have a lot of competition when it came to marketing and trying to differentiate themselves. I mean, basically they were sort of a default. You know, we're the team of Southern California and we win titles, and we're Landon Donovan's team and we're David Beckham's team. And you know, they found that last year, while the team struggled on the field, there just wasn't the same cachet. And I think to some extent it was a real wake-up call for them overall, that, you know, maybe they need to rethink things a little bit and you know, make sure that they're covering all their bases. And I think the entry of LAFC has done that as well, because, you know, they've known all along that LAFC was coming in 2018, and you know, there was going to be more competition at that point. And, you know, I think that they've really emphasized the LA connection as well. You know, both teams have really gone, we're LA. And to some extent that seems a little bit strange, considering there are so many people who live outside of the city limits of Los Angeles who also love soccer and, you know, are willing to travel into the city. But I do think that pull to the civic connections is a strong one. And it's, you know, I'm not surprised that both teams have tried to stake that territory as their own. And so right now, you know, we're in the midst of, I don't know, year 2 or 3 of both teams saying, we are LA, you know, no, we are LA. So that's been pretty entertaining, I think, overall.
It's going to be a little like the Manchester thing, where you have the United fans and City fans screaming and battling with each other of who's really Manchester, when really they both kind of are. But Alicia, when I first spoke to you after LAFC had been announced, you know, it's hard. I don't want to dwell on Chivas USA in the past. The past is the past, but there is somewhat of a connection between the two in the sense that they sort of merged from each other. So I'm wondering, now that we're here and we're seeing exactly what this fan base looks like, and speaking to you, someone who was there during the Chivas years, how much crossover is there still? Are there people besides yourself that stuck around? Is a significant amount of the fan base, or is it really just kind of a, you know, few here and there?
I think a pretty decent amount of people who followed Chivas USA at the end are following LAFC. But that said, you know, the fan base of Chivas USA had dwindled so much by the time it was folded that, you know, that number is pretty small, as everyone liked to remind us over the years. You know, it was a small group. So I think there's obviously people who were turned off by everything that happened and will not be, you know, MLS fans again. But there's a group who are. And then beyond that, I think it's important to note, and this is something that obviously LAFC wants to emphasize as the not Chivas USA, that you know, they've done a lot of work to expand the nascent fan base as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of friends of mine, you know, over the years who we've been following the building of LAFC along the way, but there's a lot of new faces, and the team has had events where fans can kind of come together and hang out and talk to owners and just have a good time and sort of get to know each other. And at those events, there's a lot of new faces, and it's pretty exciting to see people, who kind of, jump in and hear their stories of why they're coming into an MLS team now and why LAFC and that sort of thing. So, obviously I think the subgroup of Chivas USA fans, there's definitely experience there and understanding from those folks. And I think that's pretty valuable because I think a lot of the newcomers are people who are new to MLS. Not all of them, but I think a fair amount are new to MLS. So a lot of the stuff when you get into like roster rules and, there's only so many international slots and how many DP slots are there, and, kind of the brass tacks like that, the people who've been around, understand how it works. And some of the new folks are like, okay, all right, this is pretty complicated. And I think any of us who have covered the league for any amount of time would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I still get mixed up sometimes, for sure. Alicia, I'm curious, when NYCFC came in, I talked to a lot of people in the New York area to try to understand exactly where they would draw their new fans from. And it ended up being a very geographical breakdown. And it's kind of obvious in New York where that split happens. You have the sort of suburban Red Bulls fans, and you have the Manhattan, the actual NYC dwelling hipsters, so to speak, that went that way. Will there be a similar geographical divide in LA, or fans just be coming from wherever and just gravitate towards whichever team feels better for them?
I think it's probably going to be more the latter, that, I don't think there's going to be a hard and fast geographical breakdown. Like, obviously, I think probably people who live, near Carson are probably going to, continue to follow the Galaxy. There may be more representation from like South Beach or Long Beach, for the Galaxy because it's close to there. The stadium's close to there. But one thing I found was really interesting was one day I went on to an LAFC event, and saw the stadium from the outside. I went on a tour that day of the stadium. And then I decided to go home, and I took the route that took me right past the Galaxy Stadium. And what's crazy is, like, on a clear day with, no traffic, if you time it just right, it's really like 15 minutes between the two stadiums. I mean, that's pretty close in LA terms, for two stadiums to be that close together. So I think in that respect, and, there's not the same geographical kind of natural boundaries, I guess, as there are for New York and New Jersey. So I think in that respect, it's probably going to be pretty mixed, and you're just going to find a lot of people who, they just decide of their own accord what they want to do and how they want to spend their money. I wouldn't be surprised. I think there's going to be a lot of families that maybe there's one kid in the family who goes for one team and one who goes for the other, and so I guess if they have a lot of money to burn, they may get season tickets for both. That used to happen quite a bit, back in the day when Chivas and the Galaxy both played in StubHub Center. So wouldn't be surprised if you see some of that. So, I think it's going to be kind of a modeled mess, and we're not going to see any, clear, beautiful zones of fandom necessarily.
Fair enough. It's not often, Alicia, that I ask about assistant coaches, but Marc Dos Santos is not a typical assistant coach. Can you give us some insight on what exactly his role will be with the club and what kind of impact you'll think he'll have on them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how the sort of shakeout is for the coaching staff, but it really seems like so far he's sort of been the kind of the second in command, I think, behind Bob, and he's somebody that, you see him on the training pitch, and he's out there talking to the guys and really trying to get them ready for the first season. And I know that when his signing was announced, it was a surprise. We had seen at the expansion draft a few guys who were hanging around that everyone was like, oh, those are the assistant coaches, right? And the team was sort of like, we can't comment. We're still working on details, blah, blah, blah. And, Mark was not part of that group. So when he was announced, it was like, wow, okay. And obviously a lot of folks who know him in Canada, folks who are, NASL fans, USL fans, they all knew about him. And so it was like, wow, this is a pretty big deal. And I felt pretty similarly as well. But it seems like he's somebody that I think LAFC sort of see him as a coup to an extent as well, as somebody who's a valuable pickup for the team. And I think with the fact that they're bringing in guys like Mark Anthony who, have that lower league experience but are clearly talented players, he's going to be somebody who's a good bridge between, those guys that are playing, who had been playing in Europe and the guys who had been playing in USL and NASL, and, being able to kind of bring that group together. So yeah, I think it's definitely a pretty valuable addition, and I don't necessarily expect him to stick around for too long. So just because, he's a guy that's really in demand. So I think LAFC are probably going to use the time that they can, valuably, and we'll see what happens in the future.
I think Bob Bradley is one of the few managers in MLS that would feel confident and secure enough in his own role to have Marc Dos Santos below him. So that's probably a big part of that. Alicia, really to wrap up, one final question here. A little bit of a personal question in the sense that you're one of the most well-known fans of Chivas. You went 3 years walking the woods. You stuck with it. How excited are you? And it doesn't seem real for you yet that we're just less than a month or so away.
I'm extremely excited. It does not feel real. It definitely feels surreal. I went on a tour of the stadium in December and got to go sort of in the bowels of the stadium and, walk my way through. And there's a part at the end of the tour where you go down the tunnel that the players will be going down, and you walk out. And when you come out, you'll walk out onto center, the center line of the field, in the middle of the field. And that feeling of when you hit the open air, coming out of the tunnel and see kind of the expanse of the stadium from ground level was, it was really awe-inspiring. It was one of those wow moments that, you just don't get to see very often. And that coupled with the time waiting, I don't want to really, make it about me, but it's been a long time, and it's going to be, I think, pretty interesting getting back into the, weekly coverage. Something I missed for sure, but something that I, am not used to. I need to kind of flex those muscles and get back into it, but I'm definitely excited to do that.
All right. I'm sure that there's a lot of friends you've made over the years in MLS that are quite happy to have you have a team back, and I speak as one of those as well. So congratulations, Alicia. Enjoy the next month or so. Enjoy that opener. And hope you see some success in LA this year. You deserve it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, guys. I always have a good time on here.
You can follow Alicia on Twitter at Soccer Musings and follow her work on MLSsoccer.com and Angels on Parade. We will be right back.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
From LA, we took the red eye, gone to London. Things are not going well, and it hurts. We're at Stamford Bridge. I'm looking at the mascot Stamford right now, and when I'm looking at the mascot, I'm thinking he's doing a better job than Conte.
Yeah, that Watford game was the body language on the sidelines and amongst the players was not particularly something that would make you very excited if you were a Chelsea fan yesterday. Watford won 4-1 in case you weren't aware.
I'm excited. I'm mad. I'm mad and I won't take it anymore. Remember that rant from the movie The Network? That's how I felt after the whistle yesterday.
And, well, he still is employed. At least I haven't checked Twitter in about 10 minutes. So
I would have known.
I think he still is. But
my phone would have buzzed, so he's still employed. And that's the thing, though. Like, he went out of favor national team in Italy, got fired. Went out of favor of the board at Juve and got fired. Not because of the results, because he went out of favor of the board. And a certain amount of drama is going on with the board of Chelsea and with Conte, and Conte is not satisfied with the last two transfer break and the acquisitions they made, and he didn't get the targets that he wanted. And now with Giroud, it seems like he don't even want to play Giroud. It's like, I don't know. His body language, like you mentioned, tells me that he knows he's not going to be there for long, and it's just a question of waiting. And he was asked that same question by the BBC reporter after the game. Like, so, Antonio, it's like, do you feel the pressure? What pressure? Which pressure? I come to work, I come, I do it. Come on, you have to be realistic. He is under pressure. Chelsea are 1 point out of fourth position with Tottenham breathing down their neck. And you can't win the Premier League and have a type of season like this. I just had a flashback from 2 years ago. What's going on?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, as you say, people often are guilty of only thinking of the England race as the title race. And as we've said many times before, barring some kind of disaster in Manchester, this is over. But what isn't over is that battle for the Champions League spots, which is absolutely vital for the financial well-being of any club and for the ability to compete for a title.
Like, you seen the top 8 of the Premier League? It's like, 5 points, 6 points difference? It's insane. You can literally finish in the top 4 and be in Champions League or not even be close to Europe in, just 2 results.
If you assume that the two Manchester clubs are going to take 2 of the spots, and United, they're 5 points up on third and probably safe for top 4, I would have to think, unless they collapse as well. So you're looking at Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs, and Arsenal battling for those 2 spots. 51-50, 49-45 Arsenal, the lone one there. So they're a bit further back. But
but they just got Aubameyang. But they just got Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan. Have you seen them play their first game? Yeah. They'll have a lot of wins in the second half of the season, and that will be very difficult for teams like Chelsea and Tottenham, which have been able to take advantage of Arsenal's shortcomings this year so far and stay where they are, even though they haven't had the most consistent season so far. They're still kind of lucky to be in fourth for Chelsea. And now that Arsenal's got some reinforcement, they got some new cannonballs to put in their gunners, well, they're going to do well.
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, that's all of those clubs. When you look at Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs, and Arsenal, are both unpredictable this year. They both, all four of them seem to. Maybe Liverpool might be a little overachieving compared to what people thought, but the other 3 certainly are underachieving, and all of them are maddeningly inconsistent. So it's whoever can grab the grass ring, so to speak, the brass ring. I don't know what a grass ring is.
It's a little different.
To go into the
a grass ring is, depending on where you are, it's kind of legal or illegal, depending on which states. Speaking of grass ring, tomorrow night on TSN, there's a documentary, Duane, about Ross Ribagliati, and it's called Higher Ground. We have to watch that tomorrow night.
There you go. I remember '98 very, very well. It's with Chelsea though. Like as I said, when you look at, it's like when Mourinho left, it was just toxic at the end, and he just had to go, even though you understood that he was a good manager. And it's the same with Conte now. So you have to ask yourself what the culture of Chelsea is that creates that situation, because this is a consistent thing that happens to them. Managers have a very small shelf life there, and is that ownership meddling? Is that the players' culture in the dressing room? Who knows? There's something though that seems to be consistent about what happens at Chelsea.
No, and here for me, Chelsea, the way they manage their coaches is, it's almost not a moot point, but it's almost ingrained now in the actual players themselves too. Like, okay, well, we're not doing well, the coach is not doing what we want to, so let's just stop playing for a few months. We're gonna need a new coach, and there's that attitude. And at one point, Abramovich or the board of Chelsea, whichever takes a decision, depends on the day, I guess. One day, Chelsea is gonna have to stick with one manager, so that the players know that it's not them who runs the club. I'm not saying it's the case right now, but have you seen the reaction of the Fabregas, of the Hazards, of all those great players that are not performing at the level that we know they can? And they do so in spurts here and there, but they're not trying to save Conte. And I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, look, there is a certain certain level top managers that manage clubs like Chelsea, you don't see a lot of Alex Ferguson's or some vendors anymore, right? I mean, this is a broken record to have this conversation, but you certainly just don't see those long runs. It seems to be guys that come in for 2-3 years at a time. Your Mourinho's, your Peps, they sweep in, they do their job, they leave. Although Pep does seem to be making noise that he wants to stay longer term at Manchester City. We'll see whether that's the case or not. Certainly, we don't expect Mourinho to be spending 10, 15 years at United, but this is the type of thing that we see consistently within these top clubs now. And whether or not this is good, whether or not this is the way to go, who's to know? And here's the thing about Chelsea is as much as they have these up and down situations where they bring these guys in and they get it together for a year because there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of money there. Won a title last year, running away, and that is something that they always have. But
they
now,
played like 30 games.
Later.
They played like 20 games left, and they will this year. And I think that's something we're not focusing enough. And look, last year Chelsea won the Premier League, not playing in Europe and having a lot more leeway. And when you have like a preferred 11, it's amazing. When you're playing in Europe, you need like a preferred 15, 16, so you have like 16 top quality players that are almost interchangeable in the lineup, so you can actually have people on form all the time and are not necessarily fatigued, and they are in a fit form. But when you play in Europe like Chelsea this year, you don't have that, and they were deep in the League Cup. They're going to start the FA Cup soon, and they'll continue the FA Cup. And so it does make a lot of games. There's a game congestion on the schedule for Chelsea, and you see the result in games like yesterday, but it's still, in my opinion, the onus of those losses are on Conte and the board, because you knew you're going to play all those games. You have the money to do something about it, and they did not.
No, fair enough. But it also begs the question when you look at his, whether or not he's going to be qualified or not. Is that are they prioritizing Europe? Are they looking to see whether or not they can be successful there? And they still are in. Obviously, they have a very, very tough draw. But it's Conte's job. And this is.
It's like the teams left in the Champions League. Can you beat them, or is it easier for you to finish fourth in the league? I think there was an equivalent, and I think finishing fourth is a little bit easier than beating, I don't know, a Man City or Real Madrid or a Barcelona that's playing out of their mind this year, or a PSG in this year's Champions League. So maybe finishing fourth or higher in the Premier League is easier. So you kind of have to prioritize the league, and you kind of have to let go of everything else.
You would think, logically, but I wonder whether if Conte survives this week, then I would suggest that he has a job until February, the 1st of March anyway, that they are going to see him through to the end of the Barcelona tie. That would be my prediction if he does survive this week. The only way, and if he's already not been fired, like they clearly haven't, there isn't a revolt in the dressing room. Otherwise, I don't think he would have made the press conference yesterday, because that was a complete capitulation in the last 10 minutes. But
I didn't think he was going to. I thought he was going to get pulled, like from the tunnel. Somebody pulls him on the side, like, here's your sack, here's your bag, you're sacked.
Yeah, no, I do think now that they probably will stick with him through the Barcelona tie, and that will be a perfect opportunity if they fall into the Champions League at that point. Then okay, we're going to move on. The question is who you're going to replace him with, right? And you're not going to be an interim in the season, because you're not going to find the type of manager they're looking for in the season. That's just not likely. But
so Roman takes his phone. So Abramovich takes the phone and is like, "Okay, Gus, how you doing, Gus? You want to come back? I need another coach for 6 months. This time, come back, and hey, this time go get Drogba too. I don't care. He's not in Montreal anymore. He's in Phoenix. He's actually training in Phoenix. It started yesterday. But maybe we'll see that happen again. Remember that? Remember January 2016? How much we talked about this same situation.
Yeah, it's broken record with Chelsea. Either we're talking about them running away with the league, or we're talking about chaos. So here we are. It's chaos season.
Exactly. Before we wrap up for today, Duane, I don't have an image for the crew because it was already the show's already started. I couldn't able to get one, and nobody really is going to miss not seeing Columbus Crew Stadium. But the Columbus Crew and Columbia Gas made a new partnership for the future, for 2019 and 2020. That financial partnership is I'm looking for the word that I just lost, but anyways, it's
dependent.
Yes, it has
contingent.
Contingent. There you go. Thank you. That's a good word for Scrabble too. It's contingent on the crew staying in Columbus, and for 2019, 2020, and at the same time, in Austin, things are not going well. There's some protest against the Austin soccer project. There's protests against the land they want to build the stadium on, and they won't have a place to be ready to play before 2019, and if so, 2020. All that being said, are the crew saved?
No, they're not saved, but they're certainly, this is not going as smoothly as Precourt would have wanted it to go. I think that he felt that it would be a slam dunk to get some of those approvals in Austin, and there was some pushback. Basically, it revolves around parkland. Well, first, there was a couple different plans in place. There was some baseball fields that they were going to repurpose that has been shot down. The baseball folks, they pushed back and said, no, this is too valuable to our sport. And, who are we to argue about that? And now there's some parkland as well that's being resisted upon. As I said, that it was kind of this situation where I think that the only people in Austin that were hearing about the possibility of an MLS team coming to town were those that were hardcore soccer fans. So when the first sort of rumors of this started, there did seem to be a universal support down there. But as the news trickled out to other Austinites, I think they're called Austinites anyway, there started to be a resistance towards people that don't want to repurpose public land, that don't want to have public money go into stadiums. And this is a pretty common thing in a lot of cities nowadays, and you can't argue against it either. We talk about stadium stuff all the time on Five Rings.
And there's the aspect too. You heard about Austin, right? Austin, it's maybe the most progressive city in Texas. I'm talking through my head here, my hat. I've never been to Texas, never been to Austin, but this is what I was told. And the people of Austin, maybe they want a team, but they don't want it this way. They don't want to steal a team from another community. They don't want to take one of the originals of this league to bring it to their own place. And there's that mentality too of, yeah, but at what cost? We can have a team, but at what cost? And is it really worth it to steal somebody else's team?
Well, yeah, there's certainly an aspect of that. The thing I'd say, and I'd caution people about when you're talking about like stereotypes of cities, and Portland's in the same boat where you have like this idea of it's all, it's Portlandia, right? Like Portland, Boston's Portland South, all a bunch of hippies riding unicycles around and hipsters riding unicycles, right? But that does exist in those cities, but they're just part of the city. There's a whole other demographic around there, and in both cases, I know this from talking to people that live in Portland and people that live in Austin, there is also a very large sort of traditional, older, conservative base there that doesn't like to spend money on stuff and isn't particularly inclined to watch soccer. So it's hardly a slam dunk to get universal support there. But as it relates to Columbus, I do think that the Save the Crew movement does play a role in this, in the sense that it becomes easier or beneficial for MLS to listen to this Save the Crew unit, because they start to look at the overall sort of optics of pulling out of a city that's making as much pushback as this. And then they in turn look at the pushback, the sort of the lack of smooth ride they're getting in Austin, and go, you know what, this isn't worth our time. Why don't you just sell this team to local investors? And I think that that's how the Crew will be saved, is not necessarily with Precourt being convinced to not go to Austin. It'll be Precourt being told that if you want to go to Austin, go save your pennies up and get into the next expansion bid, because, as much as we tell you we're stopping after this round, we're probably not. And, I think that if he plays well and sells and does what MLS tells him to do, then he probably has a good chance to get an expansion team if they do expand from 24 to 28. So that would be what I think would happen in this particular case. The longer this goes without a resolution, a stadium resolution in Austin, the greater the percentage chance that the Columbus Crew stay in Columbus. I'd put it right now at 50-50. I would have put it closer to 60-40 or even 75-25 in terms of Austin just a couple months ago. So I think that they're slowly starting to win the Save the Crew battle.
And I think, too, Duane, that the longer this goes on, the more time, well, obviously it gives more time the longer it goes. I know that. But what I mean is the longer it gives more opportunity for business people in Columbus, for wealthy people, for fans, for anyone in Columbus to get their ducks in a row and to get maybe upgrades to the stadium, get money. And if you have time, and then you present your project to MLS, be like, yeah, you want to take our team? You want to take it away? But look, I know it's overdue. I know we should have done it a long time ago. But we got some renovations now coming, or whatever the case may be. More time this drags on, the more time Columbus can get organized at even higher level than just save the crew and maybe better the crew, maybe renovate the crew, upgrade the stadium, put some more toilet in that thing. Yes, they can do all that if they have more time to raise that money.
Yeah. Look, Crew Stadium's fine. It needs some upgrades for sure. The location issue to me is a red hair. It's not that far from downtown. I don't know. It seems fine to me, but whatever. I know everyone wants to be right downtown nowadays. So, look, the only way that
you're right downtown for a few years, but the downtown core moves. It's not something static. So you might be in the downtown core for now, but 5-6 years down the road, you're not, because the downtown core moved away. So I understand, but you still have to kind of make do with what you have and build around it. It's not just, let's build it downtown. How about we build downtown around the stadium? You know what I mean? Bring restaurants, bring entrepreneurs, bring local businesses. There's ways to do stuff.
Well, look, I look at BMO, and I would suggest that, look, as a Torontonian, I would not consider Liberty Village to be downtown. Now, I think if you're from outside the city, you might think that it's downtown. And
as someone who's been living
downtown-ish.
No, for me, it's downtown, Duane. Like, you just got to take one streetcar. For me, you're downtown unless you need to get a car or to change subway system or metro system or transport system. Like, I do feel downtown, and that's a lot of different cities, and maybe not in smaller ones, because, well, when you have 3 high-rises and they're all next to each other, guess what? That's downtown. When there's more than 3, it ebb and flows. Anyways, all this for saying that I don't think location, when it's just a kilometer or 2 kilometers or just one neighborhood versus the other neighborhood and they're adjacent to each other, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's the way you look at this situation and the way you present it to your fan that is a problem. And it's just an argument to either better your point or destroy the other guy's point. By saying, we're going to Austin because there we can have our stadium downtown. Well, guess what? Your stadium is kind of downtown in Columbus. So there's that aspect to it.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, you're right, though, and absolutely one for it, and maybe we'll end it with this, is that the way the crew are ultimately saved is if there is a lot of money that raises up from Columbus itself and supports either renovating, refitting that stadium or building a new one, and ultimately supporting it from a business perspective. As much as the Save the Crew movement from the fan perspective is worthwhile and I think does play a role, the only way Save the Crew is directly saving the crew is if one of those guys wins Powerball, right? So that's the bottom line.
Yeah. And that would be awesome, though. Hire me, and I'll be your French commentators if you need in Columbus. Who knows? I don't think you really do, but
a lot of need for that. Yeah.
Hey, there's Punjabi commentators on the CBC for hockey, Duane. So you never know. Dreams do come true.
There you go. All right.
Speaking of dreams coming true.
Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of dreams coming true, the Olympics starts on Thursday, and make sure you follow us on our Olympic account at 5 Rings Podcast. We'll be doing another daily Soccer Today tomorrow, and that will be it for about 2 weeks for the daily aspect. We'll come here and there with some Soccer Today 15 minutes, 30 minutes express shows, but the Olympics will take most of our time for Duane and I. Starting on Thursday, tomorrow, we have Daniel Firestein at 10 a.m. to talk about the Red Bulls and the off-season in Major League Soccer. It was a busy off-season for New York teams, and we'll talk about this tomorrow. But as always, you can help us to continue to do even more here on SPN. Patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Your support goes a long way. Thanks to Colin yesterday, who pledged $1 a month. That goes a long way. That's all we're asking for. If the hundreds of thousands of downloads and listeners every month would give $1 a month, or even half that if you can, we would go a long way. We'll be able to have more great quality guests like Alicia on the line. We'll be able to get more. So with your help, we can actually continue to be one of the loudest independent soccer voices in North America. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.